Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives. Good day, everybody, and check your ego at the door. Yes, that's our topic today on FitBody Fusion Lifestyle, or FitBody Lifestyle, sorry. I'm just all over the map today. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about this notion or mindset of ego and how much that drives into both what we do in the gym, but also other aspects of this lifestyle, of this fit lifestyle, how it affects your career, how it can affect your career, how the ego can be a great driver for your confidence, but it can also be something that undermines you in terms of being open to growth mindset and real development and improvement of yourself. Yeah?
Absolutely, and I would just add to that.
By the way, you look beautiful, by the way.
Well,
sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but geez, I'm just looking at you and like, wow, I'm a lucky guy. You're very beautiful.
So I was going to just add to that in relationships is, along with that. So career, relationships, family, fitness goals, certainly competing, all of these things. And it's just such a timely subject. And it's actually kind of funny because, I came into your office and said, I have this idea. I want to talk about the ego, checking the ego at the door. And you had literally written down it as a topic on your list. So it definitely, it's just kind of funny how we're resonating so much. And I'm excited to talk about this today.
And I think the reason that we're centered on this today, and it's not just a today topic, it's something we think about a lot. I think the reason we're so centered on this today is because, one, we're back into show season, and ego plays such a critical role in your receptiveness to feedback and to the opportunity to change. I think that's part of the reason. But the other part of the reason is because we've been talking a lot with our coaches about how to approach your athletes where they are and make sure that you're meeting them where you are. And I think you guys have all heard us say this, is that do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? And when you want to be right, and I mean, let's face it, who doesn't want to be right? I mean, honestly, and honey, I love you. And that's those three words, I love you, are, I know you love to hear. But the other three words I know you love to hear is you are right. And who doesn't, right? Who doesn't? And that's an ego-driven requirement or an ego-driven thing, is that we want to be right. I get it, man. I want to be right. I don't like it when I'm wrong. And then there are times when, in a more enlightened mindset, I really don't mind being wrong because I'm so curious about what is beyond my thinking about being right.
Well, and one of the things I know we've talked a lot about is if we're not making mistakes, we're not really putting ourselves out there and growing.
Right.
So really, truly, if we're pushing that next level of growth, we're going to make mistakes. So, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the reason this did come up so much for us is we do weekly educational calls with our coaches. And the big thing we talked about is checking our ego at the door when it comes to coaching our athletes. And certainly to me, I feel like what makes an effective coach, whether it be in bodybuilding or life coach or anything in life, is number one, listening. It's not about me, it's about the person I'm helping. So number one in checking the ego at the door is listening, and active listening. It's one thing to hear what somebody's saying. It's another thing to really listen for understanding, and asking additional questions to make sure that, I'm aware of where this person is coming from. Because as a coach, I can write you the best program in the world, but if it's not something you can do or that fits into your lifestyle or that you're willing to do, then it's worthless. It's worth zero. Whereas sometimes if I'm willing to make some modifications to that program, maybe a little bit of give and take to make it a lot easier for the person to execute fully, now I'm going to get, you wrote the original program that for 100%, maybe I'm getting 90%, but in that program that was written for 100%, maybe I'm only getting 20%. So again, like that's really listening, really understanding where a person is coming from whether it be the example I'm giving right now for coaching or really anything in life is to me, how we become more effective and get more out of the situations that we're encountered with.
I have a challenge that I'm going to throw out right now at the start of this episode, and I think about it a lot as I observe and listen to other conversations that are taking place that I'm either participating in or that I'm listening to around me, and I often think that as you talk about listening for understanding, which is such an important tool to develop. And it's very easy to not develop this because oftentimes, we're in a conversation, we're passionate about a topic, we are thinking about what the next thing is we are going to say, or I'm listening to what you say simply to counteract or to counter whatever points you're making. That's not really listening. That's arguing, okay? And I'm a lawyer, so I think I have a little bit of expertise on this, but I also think that when I am a more enlightened lawyer, I thought more about being curious than I did about being argumentative. So, and by that, so here's the challenge, and here's what I'd like you to do. Everybody, not right now, but in the conversations that take place after you listen to this episode, I'd just like you to kind of take mental note. When I'm listening to somebody else make a point, and I don't care what that person is, I don't care if it's a political view that you are drastically opposed to, or something physically like a gym thing. We hear all the time that you're doing that wrong. You're doing that wrong. Well, what we have found in a lot of exercises in particular is that, yes, there's a definite wrong and unsafe way, but there's a whole lot of right ways to do it. And oftentimes the right ways are specific to the individual. So when you're listening to a conversation and participating in that conversation, take mental note. Am I listening for a follow-up question to better understand what this person is saying? Or am I listening to be able to counter them so that I can be right? And if you are not directly participating in the conversation, listen to other people. And oftentimes this is the best way to change your behavior, is observe other people and listen. Somebody makes a point and say, hey, I just went to the mall. Is the follow-up to that, really? What store did you go to? Or is the follow-up to that, oh, I went to the mall too the other day? And I see that, I hear this so many times in conversations, is that there's no curiosity about what the other person is saying, because the next person is really just thinking about, how can I tell this person or this group what I'm doing, rather than be really curious about what they told me that they're doing. And so I want you to take stock of that. And in fact, I'm going to do this exercise. I don't know how I'm going to report back on this, but I'm going to take mental note, and I'm actually going to take a tally of the conversations that I participate in this next week or that I listen to, and think, how many times am I really listening for curiosity and asking a probing question to get deeper? Or am I listening because I want to find fault, or I want to advance my own agenda, or I want to tell them something about myself?
I love this challenge. Well, and as you're speaking, what you're making me think about is how many times we're in a social situation and maybe we meet somebody and, we're coming from curious, we're asking them about themselves, and maybe we walk away from that conversation. It's like, they never asked anything, or we're curious at all about
We hear this in the dating world all the time.
Right. And I mean, that's a really good way to cut short a potential friendship or relationship or whatever. You go on a date, and we hear this. I mean, obviously we're not when we go on a date with each other. But a lot of times, some of our single, athletes and things like that will, dating and things.
Our son and daughters.
Son and daughter. Yeah. They'll go out on a date and they'll be like, wow, this person didn't ask me one thing about myself. Like, not one thing. They literally just talked about themselves the whole time. And, that really is such a turnoff. And, the funny thing is when we're coming from ego in that sort of way, and we're not coming from curious, we miss out. Mm-hmm. We miss out on learning about somebody that might be super interesting and might be really fun to know. We already know everything about ourselves, so we just missed out on this opportunity to get to know this other person. So, I mean, it definitely, I think, can take some conscious effort. And I love that you put it out in a challenge like that, because I know it's something that I'm constantly working on and becoming aware of with myself. And sometimes I'll take stock of a conversation and go, wow, I talked a lot about myself in that conversation. I wish I would have learned more or asked more questions. So I feel like this applies to, I'm applying this to myself as much as I am, giving the advice to anyone else.
Well, and you will remember this story that I'm going to remind, or that that I remind you of. That's redundant. But there
From
was
the Department of the
there was
Redundant.
the Department of the Redundancy Department, right? So we were at dinner with another couple some time ago, and we were talking, and it was in this industry, and the conversation was going, and there was a lot of talk back and forth, and just general conversation about the industry and whatever the topic was.
And
at
we
hand.
we were looking at a potential collaboration.
That's right. And so one of the people one of the other couple asked me, Greg, what is it that you do? And I said, and this was a test, and I'm revealing inside information here, but now you're going to know if I ever give you this test. But the test was this: is that I've done this many times before. Is I said, oh well, I give a deflecting answer. And my answer was, well, according to Jami, I just sit at my desk and I push paper from one side to the other. And there was a laugh, right? And there was no follow-up.
And then he went right back to talking about himself.
Exactly. There was absolutely no follow-up and no, seriously, what do you do? And at that moment, my interest in telling this person anything about myself or being vulnerable or connecting or anything was just done. Because I just realized that they really don't have any interest in me. It was really more of what I could do for them or that. And I will tell you that I get it. I get it. We all get, and I've done it. Where I get on an agenda. We all hear the elevator speech, and I'm there to pitch something, and I completely understand that. I also understand the need for human connection, and that when we take a moment to be curious about somebody and really follow up with them and say, you just said this, could you tell me more about that? Man, all of the best connections I've had is when I did that. When I really did that. When I checked my ego and I really was worried less about talking about myself and really more about what I do to learn about this other person.
Right. It's all about not coming in with an agenda. I mean, obviously, if we're having a conversation, a lot of times there is an outcome that we're looking for, and it's, but it's like, you can be looking for an outcome and then still be present in that moment,
right.
Listening, participating, being part of it. In life, everything in life's about relationships.
It is.
It really, truly is. And that's the thing, I talk about this a lot, as far as my competition career in the bodybuilding world. And, I've been retired for quite some time now. And, all the trophies and medals and all those things, to me mean so much less than the relationships that I've built along the way.
Right.
That's the richness in life that is, my takeaway, my true, getting to be part of a community of people that are so driven and hardworking and dedicated, and getting to connect with these people and get to know them has been the true reward, at the end of the day for me. So it's really interesting that in a moment, a lot of times we're focused on a very finite outcome, whereas if we can kind of back away from it a little bit and look at the bigger picture and focus on the relationships, then really those outcomes come naturally.
Yeah.
I know that I can pick up the phone and reach out to just about anybody in our industry, and they'll respond. They'll be willing to, give me an answer or, ping me back or whatever. And I feel like that's because of those relationships, and that's because of, they know I'll do the same for them.
Right.
If somebody messages me, they're going to get an answer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just ignore it or ghost it or whatever. These people matter to me. This is why I'm part of this.
And if those relationships are driven by your ego, then you're never really caring about that other person. You're caring about your ego. And I think about the military aspect. That my background is that, and my dad was a World War II veteran, and who never talked about his experiences in the war, which always was impressed me in a different way, because it was never about ego or what he did, and all the thing. And I read a lot, especially in my college days, and when I was in the ROTC, and we were just reading a lot about the military. And then over the time, I read additional stuff. What always impressed me about the greatest generation in World War II is that, and I found this to be true in my military experience later, and in talking to both Korean War veterans, Vietnam War veterans, Desert Storm 1, Desert Storm 2, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, all these large-scale combat operations, is that what is consistent through the soldiers that I've talked to is that they never say that they were fighting for freedom or that they were fighting for God or country. those may have been motivators to them, but what all of them have said almost to a person is that, what I was really fighting for was the person on my right and the person on my left, because these were the people that, and sorry, I'm getting.
I know you're literally making me tear up as you're talking.
Yeah, about this, because it really is impressive that and granted, most situations in life, thankfully, are not life and death. But it's nice to know that in those life and death situations, these people defending our nation are defending it really because they are caring about that person to their right and their person to their left. This is the power of relationships and the power of lack of ego. I don't know how else to express it than that. And I'm not sorry for crying.
No, as you're talking, I'm like literally feeling the tears welling up in my eyes, and I'm like, stop making me cry. I just want to kind of drive this home to, because I love the military example and that kind of more macro sort of focus, and then taking it to the micro sort of focus when we talk about like the closest relationships in our lives. And like, I think, how important it is for us to be able to be willing to also put that ego aside. And, something I learned from you really early on, and I know I've talked about this in other podcasts, but I just think it's so relevant and so important and so life-changing for me, is giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And that is putting the ego aside, because it's like, I have my perception and how I think things should be. And I am a Virgo. So I'm very, I have a very structured way of thinking of things. Not that I'm a big astrology person, but I definitely fit that kind of personality type. But that moment of like being willing to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, and rather than jumping to conclusions that are based on, my ego, my past experience, and thinking I already know where this person's coming from or where they're going with this conversation, and instead, being present and really listening for understanding, listening and asking questions and getting to know like why you said that, what you said, and assuming the best, assuming you're coming from a positive place, a place of caring. So, this is where I feel like, we can really build some amazing, strong relationships, because none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We all say things that we regret or that we wish we would have said differently. So if we give others the benefit of the doubt, then hopefully they will in turn give us a benefit of the doubt when we, step on our tie.
That's now you're pulling out that old military saying, it's okay to step on your
genitals.
on your genitals. Just don't mark time on them, meaning don't march in place. But I got a call yesterday from a dear friend of mine, and he was talking to me about a situation at work. And first of all, I was very blessed that he called me and asked for just, I think he just wanted to vent, and we talked it out. We talked the situation out. But basically, he had sent a message to a coworker in another division, and advising them of something that was coming up at work. And so he didn't get any reply, and time went by, and so the events that were being put into place were being put into place. And so on the eve of the event, my friend sent another email and said, hey, just to remind you, this thing is coming up. And the email that he got in reply, and by the way, an email in reply, not a phone call, was, I can't believe you didn't coordinate this. You should have done this. You should have done this. You should have done this. And you should have done this. Okay.
So you shoulded all over him.
He got shoulded on a lot. And I was just thinking about that, and it made me think a lot about, I've gotten those emails, especially in the corporate world, man, that happened a lot. And I always think to something that somebody once told me, a military mentor, is that your failure to plan does not constitute my priority. Meaning that if you didn't do your job, I can't necessarily adjust my job to make your failure a priority. And I get that, but there's a deeper level to this, and it really cuts down to that benefit of the doubt thing. And so as we talked it through, what we came up with was that, in situations like that, it's very easy to reply back and say, hey, I sent you this email and here's all the documentation and I was right, okay? And if it's a person you have a relationship with, or it's a person you want to build a relationship with, which I think is as important as anything else, because there's always a bridge to be built, is to assume that, they must be having a bad day. Something might be going on in their unit that is causing this type of response. I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt, and rather than reply to this email, I'm going to pick up the phone, or I'm going to send them a text and say, hey, can you get on the phone with me for a minute? and just talk it through and say, hey, look, I sent you this email a month ago, and I'm sorry that you missed it. And maybe I should have followed up with you after I didn't get a reply, but I assumed everything was good. And I've taken all these other steps in coordination with other areas. So what's going on with you today? Why did I get this blame email, this blame mail? I'm just always amazed that picking up the phone and putting your ego aside for a minute and not really prioritizing being right, but prioritizing connection and humanity above that I'm right. I was right. Man, they don't give trophies for being right. Okay. I mean, I guess they do. If you're on Jeopardy, they give trophies for that, but, and other game shows. But I mean, and most things in life, I mean, in that exchange that I just described, there's no trophy being given out. There's no, what does winning look like? And why is winning more important than building a relationship with this person and actually solving the problem? Are you working the problem, or are you determined to prove that you are right? What is your priority in that circumstance? And I think about our relationship a lot too. I mean, when what you described is spot on, is that how do we make sure that we're prioritizing the health of our relationship above being right, above something that we're never going to get a trophy for, versus wanting to, I don't know, advance some unseen agenda. I don't get that.
Right. I do believe that the most successful people in life are those people that are connectors. They're those people that are willing to connect with others. They're willing to give, others the benefit of the doubt. There's a true underlying care and desire to, to not make it all about themselves all the time. Another situation I had recently come up, we live in a building that has some strict rules and things like that. And one of the people that works there, I had a guest that was using some of the facilities, and she just came up and just started yelling at her, and you're not supposed to be here, and this and that, rather than actually stopping, pausing, understanding, and finding out that she was my guest and that she, that kind of thing. And I ended up writing a letter to,
you did more than write a letter.
I
did.
You got
into a full-on argument.
I did, because, to me at the end of the day, treating people with courtesy and giving, it doesn't matter if this is the doorman or the Uber driver or somebody who's serving you at a restaurant or a flight attendant, all of these people that are, that we're encountering through our days and through our lives, everybody's dealing with their own stuff. We don't know what's happened to that person that day, So I think it's really, really important, and something that I'm constantly working on is this, what we're talking about, setting aside that ego, not assuming, giving people the benefit of the doubt, being respectful and kind, asking questions. I think just all of these things are such great practices. And, we talk about the giver's gain mentality, and it's, it's not that we're saying to do these things because you're wanting a gain. And at the same time, when we do these things, we do gain in life, whether it's gaining a special friendship or relationship, whether it's seeing somebody smile or just, be appreciative for the kindness. It just, whatever that is, the more we put that positive energy out into the world, the more we manifest that positive energy. And I don't want to be woo-woo about it, but it is a real thing.
It's true.
It's so true.
And a shout out to Bob Berg and Bob Berg, the author of The Go-Giver, which if we had a company manual, I think that would be our company manual.
Well, it is. We actually provide the book to all of our coaches.
And it really just discusses the power of giving. And I want to go back to, there's a couple of concepts that I wanted to go back to with you, what you said, which is, first is an old saying that, is this the hill that you want to die on? And I think about that a lot, about, am I really arguing for something that matters to me, or is it just my ego that's driving this passion and this fire? When you were standing up for our athlete with the building staff the other day, it was not about your ego. It was about you defending somebody. And by the way, for those of you who wonder why Mama Bear is Mama Bear, man, Mama Bear, when she's defending her her cubs, or her pack, or what, her people, man, I will tell you, I would not want to go toe to toe with her, not even on my best day, and I never will have to, because I will never be on the wrong side of that. But she really, I've seen loyalty is something that's so important to you, and you are loyal to a fault to the people that you defend. And I was actually very inspired by how much you stood up for this person. So, is that the hill that you wanted to die on? Yeah, you were willing to die on that hill because it was important enough to you to do that. But how many other things are you not? I mean, is it really that important to be right on this? So I think about that. I also think about, you talked about the most successful people you know. And I want to be very clear here, because, man, there are a lot of successful people, a lot of wealthy people around the world that we might think are successful. And in some ways, I'm not going to say they're not successful, they are. I'm just going to say, how do you define success? What is the success principle? And the story that I always go back to on this is a story from an old movie with Ted Danson of Cheers fame, for those of you old enough to remember that, called Cousins. And in that movie, his uncle, Ted Danson, plays a character who's his present occupation is an Arthur Murray dance instructor. He teaches old people how to dance. He literally teaches out of this loft. He has the foot things on the floor. It's so cute that he teaches and impacts these old people. It makes me emotional as I think about this. But he had been a stockbroker in his life. He had all these other high power jobs. And what he does now is he's a dance instructor. He drives a motorcycle with a sidecar. His son is 18, and he ends up having an affair with a cousin by marriage. He's at his uncle's wedding, and his uncle is getting married. His uncle's older, in his 70s or something, and his uncle is on a hammock, and he's talking with the woman that Ted Danson is having an affair with. And he's talking about Ted Danson's character, and he says, Larry is a failure at everything but life. And I'm just going to, because it makes me even emotional to think about that and how impactful that was. I mean, I saw this movie 2 decades ago. It was 3 decades ago. He was a failure at everything but life. When we're talking about success and we're talking about ego, we're talking about the heart. And accuse me of being woo-woo or whatever. And I will tell you that as you get older in life, you realize what's really important. And it's never more important as you get older. It was always important. It's just that you weren't paying attention to it. I wasn't paying attention to it. So as we're going through this conversation, I just go back to that point. And man, I would love, at my eulogy, I would love for somebody to say, Greg was a failure at everything but life. That would be the greatest eulogy ever, in my mind.
That's a beautiful story. Well, you always got to want to always give. I love that you said that, and I do think that broadening. I think we get so fixated on things that we want to accomplish in life, and I mean, I will definitely speak for myself. And it's I do agree with you that as we get older, we start to wake up and realize what was most important all along. I think about some of the quote unquote successes I've had in my life. And there was a moment I had this realization in the corporate world where, I wanted to accomplish this. And, my goal was to be, to make, $1 million by the time I was 30, and I did that. So, but it was like, I was climbing the hill. I wanted this so bad. And along the way, I missed out on developing some of the relationships I wanted to develop in my life. I, was so focused on work that I don't feel like I was the kind of parent that I wanted to be a lot of times. So like being totally vulnerable, like I can look back on it and just realize that, my focus and my desire to be successful in the way I was defining it at that time also was something that's my biggest regret, because I can't go back and get that time that I wish I would have spent doing some other things. Oh my gosh. So this is why I feel like, having accomplished a lot of things in life, and I can be very driven and I can be very singularly focused. As I've gotten older, I've realized I need to just slow down and back up a little bit and make sure that I'm not missing out on the things that are really important. And that this is, this is all coming out of this need. It was my ego. It was the ego that was driving me, because I felt like I wasn't worthy unless I measured up to this bar that I had created and set for myself. For me, it was watching my dad's success and feeling like I wasn't I wasn't going to be looked at the same way if I wasn't as successful or more successful. So, along that line of thinking, that's all ego thinking, rather than, being able to take that step back and it is something I feel like I have to do in my life a lot. And you see me struggle with this a lot because I am a very driven person. When I'm very passionate, I'm very goal focused. So it does really require that consciousness around, putting the ego aside and focusing on giving back and caring for the people that are important to me in my life.
That was exceptional, honey. And that was beautiful. And thank you for opening your heart to me and to everybody who's listening, because I hope they could hear the emotion in your voice, but and if they're not seeing the tears in your eyes right now. So that was amazing. Thank you for that. That was a gift.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was going to be this vulnerable on this podcast. I just want to really I want to talk about what's real.
Yeah.
It's like one thing to talk about concepts and talk about, ways to, develop. And at the same time, I think it's important to talk about real life, and that, the way that, I've come to a lot of the realizations and conclusions is through making mistakes, is through doing things in a way that, that I look back on and I go, wow, there was a better way, so I think that's why that's what ego is all about. Like setting that ego aside to go, hey, I made mistakes.
Yeah.
Maybe I accomplished X, Y, and Z, but, I missed out on, some of the more important things. And I
would say that ego is the antithesis to the growth mindset, because when you're driven by ego, you are not open to learning those lessons, and it's very easy to fall into that trap. And as I'm thinking about now, this is vulnerable, maybe, I don't know, but I just. For those who don't know, we are huge fans of RuPaul's Drag Race, and drag queens in general are something that we really embrace and celebrate. And we have a RuPaul fantasy league that we put together. So this season,
I won.
that Jami won, so we can announce the winner tonight.
There's my ego.
and Jordan, if you're listening, you were 1 point off, and Jordan finished second, and I finished a distant third. But it was we put together this RuPaul fantasy league just to do something fun, but. We always love that show, and part of the reason we love that show is because you see that when the drag queens start, it is all about ego. It's all about I'm fabulous and I'm this and I'm that. And as the season goes on, that kind of softens into, man, I really am open and vulnerable to the other drag queens, some more than others. This season in particular, some of them got more vulnerable. But in last night's episode, which we didn't watch, was 2 weeks, I think it was a week and a half ago that it aired, but it was the finals. And they had the mothers. What always happens in every season is that the queens will talk about the embrace or lack of embrace of their parents and family around their choices and around choosing the drag, to be a drag queen. Not choosing to be gay, because I don't think that's a choice. I think that's something you are or you're not. It's something you're born with, but that's my own personal belief. And you may have another belief, and if you do, that's fine. You're entitled to that. Going back to ego. But what was impressed me last night as we were watching the show is that they showed the parents, and what they showed two parents, and RuPaul asked them, how did you deal with the Saphira Crystal and Nymphia Wynn were two of the ones where their parents were interviewed, and both parents said the same thing, is that I didn't want to shape my child with what I wanted for them. I wanted them to be what they wanted to be. And I thought about how that is the absolute absence of ego, and how beautiful it was, and how it made everybody just really kind of become emotional, because it was not an ego driven that this parent was expressing. It was, I'm going to embrace the child that I have and find out what makes them passionate and support them in doing that.
I love that you did share that, and it was so touching. And I know there wasn't a dry eye in our room. There wasn't a dry eye in the room on the show either. And I do think that working on just embracing each other and respecting each other's differences, and being kind, being curious, learning about why people make the choices they make. We don't all have to be the same.
Right.
And we don't all have to agree on everything. And that's okay. And I think that, that's a lot of what our country is built on. And that's what true freedom is, us being able to, not necessarily adopt everybody's perspective, but to allow for everybody's perspective.
That's
and,
right.
We can have debate, we can have, and it can be a kind thing that's both sharing a perspective and also, embracing someone else's perspective, or at least understanding or accepting that's where they're coming from. So that's a great example of that, because I know it is very controversial, and there's people on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to, the art form that you're talking about. So, I think that we kind of fall into that camp of embracing the individual and the choices that they're making.
Right. And at the end of the day, look, you can disagree with somebody's choices. You can. And there's I guess where I'm going is that there's different ways to support somebody. So with our children, if my son or daughter makes a choice that I just vehemently disagree with, I just don't like that choice, that doesn't mean I can't support them. I may not agree with the choice, but the support can come in different forms. I mean, there's financial support, there's showing up for the person, there's saying, look, I disagree with that choice, but I will support you as long as you are happy. And what that means to me is, and I'm going to define what my support may look like. It doesn't mean that I abandon that person. It doesn't mean that I shun them, that I no longer have them in my life. And if somebody is making choices that are you just cannot wrap around, you cannot agree with, then you have a decision to make about whether you want that person in your life or not. And that, I don't think that's an ego thing. I just think that's a choice thing. And you've got to, I may not respect everybody's choices. Excuse me, that's not, I said that incorrectly. I can respect a person's choice without agreeing with that choice. Those are two different things in my mind. It's not a choice I would make for myself. But again, this comes, as we started this episode, we started talking about listening to understand. Instead of judging a choice, how different would it be, and how different would your perspective be, say, if I'm having a conversation, hey, you made this choice, would you tell me why you chose to do that? It's always interesting to figure out what motivated that person. And when you can put your ego aside and just listen, it doesn't mean that you're ultimately going to agree with it. It doesn't mean that you're ultimately going to, embrace it. It can mean that you understand it. And at least at that point, you have that choice to make, being fully informed without you being driven by your ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's going to be certain things that, we cannot tolerate, as individuals. And that's
Right.
going to be defined by, our own values and our own, kind of code of ethics and that kind of thing. For me, like if I have somebody that treats someone I really care about poorly, I'm a big stickler on, what you put out into the world, especially in social media, because we're in an environment now where everybody's got a bullhorn. And so if somebody goes out and tears someone else down publicly and that kind of thing, that for me is just, that's not something I tolerate. Like, obviously that's a choice that they're making, and for me, that's where, that's a line I draw. And I've removed some people from my life for making choices like that. Again, like, it's not that I dislike or don't think that person is, a bad person or whatever. It's just that they make choices that don't align, with
your core values,
with my values.
Yeah.
And so, we're certainly not saying, you have to love everybody
Nope.
and keep everybody in your life. You definitely have to make decisions for yourself, but there's a difference in, and I'm not going to go be mean or lash back out to those people and do what they did.
Right.
I am going to protect myself though, and not, keep those people so close to myself, and so I think that, kind of differentiating between those two sides of things is really important.
Yeah. And I do think that it's very easy to shift into a binary mindset of love, hate, right, wrong, black, white, good, bad. And most of things, and there are certain things that do certainly qualify in those areas. And most everything else is not. It's like the current state of our political environment. We are being ruled by the fringes. We are being ruled by the people with the loudest voices at the pulpits on either end of the spectrum, where most of us are right in that middle. And the differences between us between the people on the right and the people on the left in this moderate area in this middle is really not that great. But the distance between the people on the fringes is huge. And so much of the argument is about being right rather than about, hey, what's the best way? What's the best way? You're not going to please everybody with every decision, but what you can do is seek what is the greatest good that we can do this. And am I making a selfless decision or a selfish decision? And that's something that, again, using some of the military aspects of this is selfless service and selfless leadership, a servant leadership. These are concepts that are really important to me because I don't want to be driven by ego. I don't want to be driven by what is always best for me. I want to be driven by what's best for us and what is the best way to get to a solution that benefits the most people.
And I'm super grateful for that. And I'm really grateful for, this topic and this conversation today, because I feel like it's just been such an incredible opportunity to kind of share and be vulnerable. And, the challenge that you gave, I love, and I'm excited to go and continue to work on, my own opportunities of setting the ego aside, staying passionate, staying hungry, staying motivated, and at the same time, being able to come from curious, being able to, care for others, keep a little bit of balance in how I'm approaching things in life.
And let's go one other topic, and we're just at time, but I do want to get into this because really it was kind of how we started this whole topic, was thinking about feedback at a show. And just, again, tying it to this competition world that we live in every day. And that ego-driven mindset of feedback. And we've talked a little bit about feedback and being receptive to it and growth mindset a little bit, but specifically to this topic of ego, man, it's tough. You are at a show and you have worked for weeks, months, years, whatever it is to get to that show, and you didn't get the placing you want, and the feedback is something that just is not. If you're not open and curious about the feedback and you're driven by your ego because you think you should have won, man, it's going to be hard to really open your mind and be curious about what can actually make you better. And I think about, I think I've shared this before, but one of my favorite quotes from the Buddha is, stress exists in the gap between your ego or your expectations, which is your ego, and your reality. When the greater the gap between expectations and reality, the greater the stress. So accept everything and expect nothing. That's how the quote goes. And man, I will tell you, my dad, that was my dad, man. That was my dad. My dad was that guy. He was that guy who just did not expect anything. He accepted whatever came to him, and he was the one person I've met in my life who was without ego. Couldn't believe it.
You are very blessed to have had the Zen master as your dad, and yes. as you're talking about relating to what we're talking about to the competition world, it applies for us coaches as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I got to check my ego at the door too when we're getting feedback sometimes, and I expected a different outcome, and as you said, that expectation is what gets you in trouble. And then when things don't happen, the way that I expected, sometimes there's that processing that has to happen. So I think it's a constant thing that we're always needing to work on. So it's just, all we're doing is just shining a light on this area so that, everybody has a chance to do what we're doing, which is that reflection of, was I present? Was I listening? Was I learning?
Yeah. And as we were talking with our coaches yesterday about that topic, and how your ego and wanting to win and wanting to really stand up for that person might actually get in the way of that person reaching their highest expression of themselves. Because when your ego is driving, when you're mad, when you're projecting that energy, or you have that energy, that's going to overlay on your athlete, and they're going to start feeling what you're feeling. And so if you are showing major disappointment and, oh my God, I cannot believe this, well, that's what they're going to experience. And so we talked a lot about that with our coaches. And really, if I'm going to leave you with one saying, it's this is a gut from the military, check yourself before you wreck yourself. and it really is that moment of just checking, what is driving my behavior right now? Is it the need to be right? Is it the need to advance my agenda? Or can I just back off a minute and be genuinely curious about what's going on here?
I love it.
Okay. All right, I think we're done. with this episode. Man, that was an emotional roller coaster.
It was.
We went up and down and all over, all around. So check yourself before you wreck yourself. I think we got that out. And everybody remember the three. Like, comment, subscribe, and leave a review so that we can provide you the content that you want and that resonates with you. And hopefully, we are making an impact on you and we are having an influence on you, because that's why we do this. We do this because we really love this and we love each other. And so remember the 3 Bs. Be good to yourself.
Be good to each other.
And be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBodyFusion.